Yeah, on average, so 3 and then 2 and then 3 again.
What does that equal?
Uh,
And how do we apply the Pythagorean theorem to that? Can we do that? I love the Pythag. Hey, welcome everybody to another edition of Push to Talk. And yeah, we know we're live, as you know that we know how it works.
Oh
Anyway,
crap! I was getting water.
we want to welcome CCP Retardi. Is that it? Ratati? How's it? How do I say it? Did I say it right?
toddy.
Ratati?
Raw toddy.
Ratati.
You have to
And
roll the R. Ratati.
my favorite CCP name, CCP Goodfellow. It is.
Thank
by the
you.
way. It is. Even though we have you down in the corner because you're diseased. You can't be near you on the screen.
6 feet minimum.
You know what would be really
Goodfellas
cool?
practicing social distancing right now.
It'd be really cool if we had those. Do you ever see the X Windows background where they have the little bugs that crawl behind the windows when you move them? You guys ever see that? Or am I dating myself? With X
You always take
Taking
yourself
yourself quite
seriously.
seriously.
It's like nostalgia hour when you start talking.
All right, I'll get my Deck 5000 out. Oh, good. Okay. So, Vast Gamer wants to know why you're named that.
My name or Ratati?
Up top, Matati. And how to get
It's
it?
it's Icelandic. So, do you know Lucky Luke, the cowboy from the comics? So Ratari is the Icelandic version or translation of his dog's name. I think he's called Rontanplan or something, or
Rintintin.
Rintintin. Yeah.
Oh, Rin Tin Tin. That I know.
So that is the dumbest creature on Earth, and it's my favorite character of all time.
Rin Tin Tin was awesome. What are you talking about? It was a smart dog. At least in the U.S. version.
He was a special dog. Let's
Yeah.
settle on that.
So hey, we didn't do too bad with the sound. We did the standard, intentionally broken sound. So we're here, and we finally brought this together. We do apologize to you guys for messing up the time the first time, and we probably messed up the time the second time to you too. So
That was me. That was me.
we weren't going to make it.
But you have to screw it up
the hit.
twice so
Yeah.
you can have the third time lucky, right?
Yeah,
It's not
there you
called
go.
second time lucky. It's called third time lucky.
Yeah. So we thought, oh, what? Clearly, I can't read that. So, somebody help me out in chat. Help the brother out. I have no idea. No idea. Are we gonna say it? Are we
I'm definitely
demonetized yet? Or are we
not
still
Google
good?
translating it right now.
Okay.
Carry on though.
Okay. So, hey, how do we want to start the show? What do we want to say? Other than welcome to
I think
our guests.
McLeod's
It's so
got to
nice to
stick
have you here.
and do the opening, since he's basically responsible for. Well,
I'm not
Ratati being here.
responsible. Caleb, why do you keep on making me responsible?
Because
You're
you
a
are the
responsible
prophet. Come
person.
on,
Hold on.
own it.
I'm raising my hand. I have a question. Are you wearing
Question?
that stupid hat, McLeod? Or are you actually?
No, I'm not actually,
Did you
because
fix the
I
bill
did have
yet?
a haircut.
Okay. I need a haircut.
No,
Holy
the
crap!
bill's
You
not
know
being
how long my
fixed.
hair
He
is?
won't have fixed the bill.
Yeah. Okay. How long my hair is? Jeez, I need a haircut. All right, so let's go. Let's go with the show. Enough chit chat.
Oh, Rothan said basically that you'll truly miss the fact that we are coming to Iceland. Apparently, I think that's something that he said, something around that. It's Icelandic. So Goodfellow and Ratati would know. Anyway,
Until they start speaking Old Norse in channels, it's like what the stop that.
Hey, I just wanted to give a shout out to Holy Thok. That name wasn't intentional or anything. For 22 months of subscribing with Twitch Prime. Thank you very much, Holy.
so I need to ask, and I'm not entirely certain whether you actually know whether this happened or not, Ratati, whether you heard about it or whether you even saw it. But at some point, a fair few episodes back, I made a bit of a request / I implored CCP at some point to hire an ecologist. And it seemed almost as if someone heard that and then was like, let's fast track this. Because like all of a sudden it was announced that you were basically in charge of the ecology of EVE Online. And I was like confused, amazed, and also skeptical as to whether that was actually anything to do with what I said in any way, shape, or form. Which I still hold down the fact that like it wasn't, but like was like how long had you been gearing up for being, the head of ecology for EVE Online?
I think the announcement was, Simon, I can't remember. It's September, I guess, 2019.
Yeah, internally, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think around that time is a good guess.
So I have
Oh,
to.
so
Like,
it was probably definitely before I actually said anything.
I think so. I don't think you can claim this one.
It was funny because it was almost like the day or maybe 48 hours after he had just said that as his last thing on the show. And you got announced publicly, and that your CCP name showed ecologist on your Twitter. So it was just very funny because we just dedicated an entire show to talk about those things. So it was kind of exciting.
It was very weird. Like personally, I was like really confused.
Do you feel better in your insignificance now, McLeod?
Yes, I now feel like I can carry on regardless without like having the like a big brother eye
Nobody's
on me or
looking over your
something.
shoulder. Nobody's listening to what you say.
Well,
Yeah.
But great minds think alike, though. I think it's good that he spotted it.
yeah. There's they would have said that it was because of you if you knew how to wear a baseball hat with a properly formed bill.
Yeah,
always
or ping me before. I easily would have like given it to you, but
No.
snooze you lose.
Well, water under the bridge.
Yeah, it's it was good. I mean, so
That does though bring up another question, purely from the what players should be looking at and thinking you're involved with. What part of EVE isn't part of the ecosystem?
That's a question that we keep asking ourselves these days. There's a lot of overlap, obviously. But we try to separate into features and content. So the segments are core experience, which is just the look and feel and interaction, UX, UI, new player journey, tutorial, all that stuff is another segment called core experience. And we also have another segment which is mostly engine focused. So audio, graphics, art, and etc. And then there's a fourth segment which is basically broadly content. And content means literally the content in the game. So agents, AI, factions, lore, narrative, all those things, events, daily logging campaigns, those kinds of things. That's all content because it's basically activity. What we're doing is kind of messing with once you've delivered a feature into this ecosystem, then we take over and kind of like make sure that it doesn't break or break anything in the system. So it's basically like, and that's why like I really like the ecology part. We are kind of like a gardener or caretaker of the ecosystem. All kinds of features and teams and segments add into this ecosystem, new content, Triglavians, all that stuff. They have a creative vision for that feature that really isn't my domain. But once they've shifted into the ecosystem, it's my responsibility and our team's responsibility to make sure that it doesn't break anything. So it's literally like adding rabbits to Australia, and then I can't remember like the whole thing. Just trying to keep everything in a good shape.
So broadly, broadly, it's how everything fits together.
Yeah, and we can basically step in and say, hey guys, this is broken right now. We have to tone this back, or suggest changes. We don't actually change all of the things that we'd like to get changed. If I want to add risk to a dungeon, I can also go and ask content to make the AI harder. That's how it could work.
So
Basically, it must feel a little bit like getting thrown into a completely wild back garden where no one has actually lifted a finger for quite a while. Doesn't it feel a little bit overwhelming because there's like so many things that have been left unattended and have pretty much grown wild and crazy, and some stuff has actually been left fallow and almost dead?
Uh, it is very much like that. It's like a very old garden. There's weeds, there's like all kinds of trees and plants in various shapes of disarray. Sometimes you water them, sometimes like you have to like cut them loose and replant. We're still in kind of the estimation phase of like what needs to get done, what's the highest risk, what's the most difficult thing to tackle. Um, so that's why we started with botting. That was the immediate concern when I came in. Um, and I was asked specifically to start doing that after Nova was canceled. I moved straight into that, and I just saw it as a very interesting problem to solve. And it's not solved yet, but we've made an incredible headway against the botting in the botting war. I mentioned it in the polls, and I will be publishing a dev blog next week where I go through in detail what the outlook is for the ecosystem and the progress that we've made.
Just because you
wow,
mentioned the
awesome.
fact that you had been working on the first person shooter stuff and have been kind of away doing that, um, don't you have a lot of like catching up to do with things that happened while you were not necessarily paying that much attention to what was happening in EVE Online? Because you must have been quite busy out there, even though at least I noticed that you were trying to put some of the feel and features from EVE Online into the first person shooter, but you must have missed a lot of design changes during the time you were away.
Yeah, I actually wasn't on Eve before. I went straight into Dust from like in 2012, 13ish. I started out as the director of finance planning analysis, which was basically just aligning all business plans and go-to-market strategies, and like all of the business planning was done centrally when we had World of Darkness, Dust Found 4, and Eve all going together. Uh, and once we basically it was a strange transition when we started working on Legion. I was obviously a huge Dust Found 4 player, and this is probably where I.
Ooh.
Three Dust fans are watching,
I
but
think there's a few more than that, but yeah.
I'm going to tell you, I never played Dust, but I so wanted it to work.
yeah, me
Because
too.
I thought that whole bridge between two games was just like such a cool concept that we could say no game has this, only us. You know, I'm not a big
This was a
first
very
person
had-
shooter
solid
guy
game.
because I suck at them. McLeod knows he's played them with me.
Well, the thing is, Eric, like you'd probably like Dust because Dust isn't one of those like Twitch shooters that requires like like absolute. It's not all about like response times. It's more about like creating like it's more about teamwork and more about building like a good kind of good functional set of suits that work as a team than
It
just
was
Twitch gameplay.
it was just I think the analogy with Eve is obvious. There's a lot of fitting game. There's a lot of
Mm.
meta going on. You'd have to like figure out what you wanted to play for yourself, but you also wanted to like at least counter the meta if you didn't want to be a part of it. Uh, so it running Dust was literally like this job. It was just a smaller scale version of it. So I was happy to keep doing it. It was my favorite job. So it combined gaming, economy, working in spreadsheets. Those are all fantastic things to do.
I actually don't mind the spreadsheet part of it, although I don't do it much anymore. I mean, because I don't do production. You know, if I do anything, I might mine socially with my buds, but I haven't done anything for quite a long time. Just have been so busy real life. But can't wait to get back to the game. I think we have a couple shout outs to do to a couple, at least one new follow. Grey Cup, second month with signing up, following. And who was the other one? There was another one. Follow XD6800. So thanks, guys, for that.
Quick question for Rotati, like just like for the audience there, like ecology does, as Surrender said, like it covers a huge amount of things, right? So what you specifically do from an ecology sort of standpoint, it's very much an active and productive kind of aspect of ecology. Like you're there, like solving problems, like seeing the like the cause and effect of various different things that happens, that changes in the environment, right? It's not just because when a lot of people like search and like view and look for ecology like a that particular subject in like Google search, that kind of thing, you see a lot of academic studies and a lot of academic stuff. But your kind of your framework, what you do is very much productive, very much like troubleshooting and solving problems, right?
Push the talks, Larry.
Oh shit! I look up the definition of ecosystem rather than ecology. I think it is a much better analogy. It more describes how difficult, how complex systems work together.
You gotta mute your mic on Skype, please. Yes. You killed us all. But
sorry,
everybody loved it.
Sorry.
Everybody loved it. It was cool.
Fantastic.
You know, I like it when I'm not the one screwing up the show, so I just appreciate the fact that you're here.
It happens so rarely.
All right.
There's all.
I'll try to repeat it. Ecosystem rather than ecology, I think, is a much better analogy.
Okay. Very good.
You get way less biological PhD.
Yeah. So
things.
the up above, before we had a big scroll here, Moradin Mandarb. He was a great guy. I had dinner with him a couple of weeks ago. He said up there, what's the goal of all the ore changes? Is it that there's too many minerals in all, or what is it? What are your thoughts on that? I mean, if you're not allowed to say, that's cool too, but I think a lot of people are interested.
I'm just framing the... So obviously there's just been abundance, and a lot of that was added back in 2014, I think, or 15, where some of the basic minerals, I think, were injected at 100x. Some ore change happened where the quantity of certain minerals went up by 100, and obviously the price fell immediately on the market. And following basically the solve anomalies, the ore anomalies, and the introduction of oracles, high-sec moons, basically there is no finite amount of ore in the world. It's just as much as you can take from the system. And we didn't have any, or don't have any, control at that time. So it was basically as much as you wanted, you could just harvest it, which obviously, because it's practically very easy to multi-box or vertically scale, you can just add more alpha miners or omega miners all the way up to oracles, but orcas as well, and the smaller mining ships. and it's just been out of control. And you can just see it in all the indexes. Plex price went up, all ship prices went down, Titans being commonplace, super carriers being commonplace. This isn't the world that we wanted to live in. We wanted aspirational goals, and if everyone can just pluck from trees everything they want, they like you just lose interest. And that is the complaint that's coming through now. Maybe not during the golden years when everything was fun and like you're just trying to get as much as you could into your pocket. But now everyone or a lot of the veterans have lost their will or appetite for destruction, and now it's basically complacency, and that's probably the worst place to be in a game. I'd rather be in the complete opposite direction, and everyone's starving for rarity in that sense. In World of Warcraft, you can just finish all the raids and get all the epics immediately. Like, what's the point? Obviously, Eve and World of Warcraft MMOs, like, is there a point other than just to drive social conflict and have fun? But at least I think we've drained fun out of the system by having abundancy, and that's what we want to pull back on.
Just to follow up on that a little bit, because you mentioned the thing with botting and scaling with alt accounts and all that versus the vertical scaling. Are you going to consider focusing more on getting that scalability into the actual client instead of, say, on character sheet limitations and things that are basically always going to be solved with adding another account instead of, say, figuring out this is too strainy for me, I'm going to outsource these things to another player? What are your thoughts on getting that back? Of course, my obvious one is what happened with industry and how infinite slots in the new industry design pretty much made it possible to just add more and more accounts and then completely outcompete any intention of collaborating or outsourcing the work.
I think, like, I don't want to judge the past, but yes, there's a lot of things that I don't agree with. Infinite slots is one, and I can, like, I've asked around for that specifically, like why that or how that came to be. This was all a big UX change. Like, the intent was to, like, the old system was terrible. So the overall intent of structures was to take away the, like, the bad UI UX of the old pauses and all those things, and streamline it, make it less, like, difficult for players to manage and run. So just remove tedious tasks and that kind of stuff. No one was at that point, I think, just hyper focused on the risk of that, like, of the things that we introduced into the game at that time. They were all, like, well meaning with good intent, but now we see that, like, they've done some damage, and I think we can try to pull some of these back as well.
Because it feels to me, and I know I share this with quite a lot of people, like many of the things that have been introduced to the game and then somehow, you can call it nerfed or shelved or fallowed, was originally really good ideas and good intentions. Another example is something like teams that added this potential diversity in industry, which everyone was kind of excited about, but then it was kind of introduced in a way that was broken and it was easy to abuse. So then it ended up being completely removed from the game, even though the idea and the concept was valid. And these things add flavor and decorum to the whole game, right?
We were just talking about teams the other day, and a few people remembered, like, working on it or, like, working beside the feature team. No one remembers why it was pulled, and there's there's also something to be said about documentation. And a lot of my work is a little bit of archaeology, if you will, trying to find out what has been tried, what was there a valid reason for some of these things, and the alternative before is worse. Like, I don't want to do that, so I'm trying to talk to, like, that's why I talk to the CSM, and I kind of dig around at CCP to say, like, guys, remember when he did this in 2012? Do you remember why? Was there a great reason for it? And not many people remember.
You
And
remember,
so,
don't you, Avengers?
The reason for teams getting pulled? You mean other than the fact that a handful of wealthy industrialists basically monopolized all the good teams and didn't even use them? They just locked them down so nobody else.
Exactly.
okay, that sounds good. I didn't have that information, but yeah, archaeology, and I know that ore anomalies were also well intended. The plan was to get new players into Null under the umbrella of nullsec corporations, allow them to learn their trade in relative safety. That was the intent. It was a good intent, but some of the execution was like didn't go out as planned, I think.
It's
Go ahead.
I wrote an article about this a while back about these three things that were introduced to the game, that each and every one of them was a really good intention, and it was actually potentially a good feature by itself. But when you combine them, they bring in a horrible new normal in the game. And this brings me to mentioning them in order, right? You have the anomalies, you have skill point injections, and then of course the Rorqual, which is something we always come back to, right? So could you maybe talk about how are you guys looking at using something like ecosystem science to go back and figure out which, especially ships, are broken when it comes to pulling prime resources out of the actual game?
I think Rorquals they were planned to be foreman type ships, uh, and they were supposed to be force multipliers in the sense that like a super carrier for combat. Um, at some point, it ceased to be that, became something else. I don't know the reason or why, but I think there's plenty of ways to make it way more interesting. I think there's plenty of ways to make mining more interesting. There's a lot of unused design space in mining specifically, and we have, even if it sounds boring, we have like loads of ideas what to do with mining without starting to do anything complex. But um, I'll just say one idea. It's not like a design or anything, but it's something about high yield ores and low yield ores, and trying to separate an excavator that is supposed to take something like a lot of earth with a low yield mineral, like let's say gold. You have to dig like a ton, and there's 1 gram. That analogy doesn't exist like properly in Eve, and the Oracle could have been that, where you have to mine huge quantities to get a tiny quantity of the rare thing. And if you were trying to use something like the polar opposite, a flash pan, you have your pickaxe and your specialist who's just picking away trying to find the nugget of something, tiny quantities, and these two can't perform each other's job. And I think that's probably how we kind of create new specializations or professions, in where you need a small ship with a small laser to get the best quality of one item, and then you need the Rorqual and its big excavation to get the quantities of the other mine. Like, that's just a thing that I just take from a real world example, because I know these things exist. You don't go mining diamonds with an excavator. You pick them out by hand, and vice versa. You can't pick coal out with hand. So I think those analogies work. And there's plenty of other things like instability or scanning down or dynamic mining, where you have to react to something. And a lot of people complain about that. Like, don't, and they say, don't like leave my AFK mining alone. Like, I like chilling. Don't make it worse for me. And I
Now
think
you
my feedback to that would be, I could make it more. Uh, I would say, if you were paying attention, you'd get more. So I won't mess with your chilling. But if you want to sit there and pay full attention, maybe there's something in it for you if you do that well.
and that's kind of the active versus passive feature design and things like that. But I'd like to take you back a little bit to the panning for gold, or even extracting, say, gold from actual ore, right? The whole refining thing. how come refining is instant? It's just something that's always bothered me. Why is it instant in this game? And the same goes for repairs and that whole thing, right? Why do we have these instant things? Instant compression, instant repairs, and instant refining. That just doesn't make sense to me.
I'm just gonna write this down.
Yeah, well, some of it
yes,
I can
please.
see from a practical perspective. Just to put timers in would be just a huge pain in the ass.
I mean,
for some things. But like
there's an aspect.
refining makes sense that would be a job. I mean, it really does. It would take a period of time. I do want to ask one question. I've been trying to wait for a pause to do it. And by the way, guys, it's not a trick question. I'm not trying to put you on the spot by it, and you can refuse to answer it, and that's fine. But when you talk to a lot of players, and we talk to a lot of players, both when we run our corporations and do various things, there was a whole feeling that there is a feeling out there by some players that putting something like the Rorqual out there, okay, when most of us could see that was a bad idea, right? But CCP did it anyway, and it was really expensive, and it caused a lot of people to skill inject and get into this and buy a lot of things. Some players felt that, that was almost like a money play by CCP. I'm not saying it is, so please don't think that I'm trying to infer. But when you put big, powerful things out there that a lot of people have to invest in, both monetarily and everything to get into them, is there a thought at CCP about that, and does that play into some of your decision making? And that question is not, we think it so we'll make money on it, but do you think it, like, maybe it's a bad idea if people have to invest a lot in it, and maybe we shouldn't do that? I mean, does that play at all? And by the way, I'm not trying to trick you here or anything.
I know the answer. It was to create an aspirational goal for miners, just like combat pilots had super carriers and titans. That's literally it. Like, they wanted to make something really good, really crazy, really powerful, a capital that you could be proud of as a miner.
Yeah.
That was the intent. And
by the way, my question wasn't, did you do this for a money grab? That wasn't my question. My question is,
I get it.
When you think about it, and you say, "Oh, maybe some people are going to be really crazy and drop $1,000 to do this, or whatever it was." I don't know, right? And maybe we shouldn't do it because that would just be seen badly, right? I don't think that was your intent to money grab, so please don't think that was.
No, I honestly, I wasn't there. Okay. But based on how we work and how we've always worked, it's to create engagement in the game. That is our primary design goal. And basically our monetization is and has been the same since the start of this, since we started trading Plex. It was basically trading time, work, effort for something that other people would perceive as valuable. And that's it. That is the whole paradigm that we've been working on since the introduction of that trade item, token, or Plex. And I think it's the fairest monetization that is available in a game like this. I think we can make mistakes. I think we can make. There is the pitfall that if we make something powerful enough, there will be this drive to do that. And I know that other free-to-play games do this often, is to introduce something overpowered in the beginning. Everyone flocks to it. Then they buff it, nerf it a little bit, balance it into the game, and the cycle continues. We've not done this on purpose. And if you take all the nerf cycles and count them up with the buff cycles of ships throughout the game, I think they'll probably equal out. And definitely not on introduction. Sometimes we've introduced ships that are completely underpowered and needed 2 or 3 years to get into the right place. So I think that's where I'm coming from. We're very careful of this pay to win aspect, and we try to avoid it completely. We just try to go through the engine, making a cool ship. It needs skills. If you want skills, you know how to get skills. If you want to grind, you can buy. If you don't want to grind, you can pay for ISK or money, or that's the fairest way to do it.
Yeah, I mean Eve is very unique that way. Yeah, and really the core of my question was really just like, hey, when you realize that players might do this and might have this interpretation, right? Do you sometimes shy away from doing that because a reputational thing, right? And
I think it's also a responsibility question, and that's why the reorg happened. Is that once the ship was launched into the universe, that team just started doing something else. They
yeah,
they weren't responsible for the Rorqual living in the universe. They went to do something else, and then it just roamed or
yeah, yeah,
and kind of kept doing what it was doing. And that's why the reorg happened, is to create these responsibility chains where someone is responsible for making sure that things that exist in the ocean, if you will, are in balance.
yeah,
Yeah,
So
I think Rafsati hits nail on the head there. It's the intent of the Rorqual was good, but it's incredibly hard also just to quantify the impact of change like that on a complex ecosystem like this. So, but now there is a whole segment responsible for looking at Eve with a filter of impact on the ecosystem, and then it's just much more clearer uh, who is responsible for what.
yeah.
yeah, and it's
I
been
do like
going
this. Yeah.
really well in the past 6 months, because we're getting a lot of like, hey, we're thinking about this. Is it okay by you guys? Or do you think this Triglavian Dreadnought is too powerful? Like, we're getting these questions now, which they were asked within the team, and maybe a little bit up and down in the old org. But now, like, someone is responsible, and we basically we kind of vet it and say, yeah, it sounds good, but we'll keep an eye on it.
I've got a question about something you said earlier. You said that the veteran players appear to have lost their appetite for destruction. What are you basing that on?
Sentiment
Like from
directly surveying the community. That's the key feedback that we get for through our channels and through our survey, is that inequality has gone up. The rich get richer. Even then, even if ships are replenishable easily by these players, they don't care to fight because they'll be replenished by the other side tomorrow if they make a big win. And I think that kind of like, I blow up your Titan, but I know you can build one within a week with only materials that you harvest within your own system with no risk. That doesn't sound like an exciting game to me. You want to inflict pain, I guess, to
the
make it feel
reason I
fun.
ask is because like we hear a lot about, oh, nobody's risking their titans, nobody's getting their titans blown up. But the reason that people aren't risking their titans and getting their titans blown up isn't that they don't want the destruction. It's because of exactly the opposite problem from what you were just saying. You were saying that everything's so easy to replace, but if you lose your super capital fleet, you're done. You will get kicked out of your space. You cannot recover, and good luck breaking back into null if you don't already have a super capital fleet. So you can't afford to lose it. So you can't afford to risk it.
Yeah, and I think that's the oppression of the super capital, that the N+1 problem, and that just needs to be fixed as well. Fixed, patched up,
Like, I mean,
got into a better place.
is there some plan in the works to make it so that super capitals are less necessary for holding some?
Uh, CCP Rise has been working on this for ever, I guess, but his increasingly focused on this problem. It's something that the CSM and we discussed at length at the last summit. Just coming into this ecosystem or game mechanic with a complete like guest's eye a year ago, like my immediate question was like, where are the actual counters to Titans and super carriers that are not Titans and super carriers? And there are none, and that's what we need to introduce.
But here also, I think the team has been taking steps into this direction, and I think that is a much better strategy to do something, learn from it, iterate on it, continue,
Absolutely.
instead of taking some extreme thing and then like having a really difficult time quantifying everything.
I think I agree with Sammy. The doctrines are so complex that we need to think every single change through, like, to a fifth degree. Like, what happens then? What happens then? What happens then? And then the Munin, and then the Loki, and the Tengu. Like, it, we have to try to forecast and project each of these scenarios. We're getting better at it, or at least it feels we're getting better at it. Um, I didn't work on this before, but uh, it feels that we got to a very interesting consensus at the end of Summit, and it's a foundation that we've been working on. Like I said, I know CSP Rises were working on this, chipping away at super carriers for since at least last spring. And we want to do it that way. I don't want to nerf a class of ship into oblivion just because it's oppressive right now. We want to kind of massage it into the right power.
I'd like to ask a question that's kind of related to this, but in a roundabout way, because, well, as far as I know, in the real world, it takes a lot of resources to actually have upkeep on something like an aircraft carrier or any big stuff like that. These people need food, and you need ammunition, and you need repairs and all these things. And that brings me on to my actual question. Are you guys looking at fixing the fact that currently we have a lot of sheep running around with chainmail armor that are completely upside down when it comes to defense and cost to produce? Because the philosophy, at least way back in the past, was that the smaller stuff that did a lot of the resource gathering and did a lot of the industry was cheap to build, cheap to replace, but very, very easy to lose, right? So we had a dynamic where sheep actually were in danger to the war machine. And because you need the sheep to feed the war machine, you kind of had to actually do the ship herding. And this brings me back to the fact that your name is actually Ratati, which is an actual German Shepherd. So will we see something like that in the design decisions in the future?
That analogy was a bit deep for me, where you lost me with a chainmail sheep.
Well, that's kind of what Caleb does.
That's Caleb.
Okay,
Yeah.
if you have the whole dynamic of sheeps and wolves, right? If the sheep are wearing armor and are too difficult to actually feed on or kill, then you have a whole balance system that's out of whack, right? It's back to the ecosystem stuff. In the past, if you wanted to own a Titan, right? First of all, it took a 50 to 100 man group at least to source the materials to build that thing, right? But then you also had to upkeep the things that the Titan was part of, right? So you had the cost to field these things were tied into the actual resource gathering, not just to replenish it instantly with your 3 raw pool accounts, right? It's just that something went wrong, and we have had very little design direction when it comes to things like fueling, upkeep, ammo cost, strain on that system.
Absolutely.
It feels too easy.
So that's negative feedback loops is something that we simply have. I can't think of one that exists in the game where you actually have to make a trade-off, because everything is upgrade, yes or no, and it's usually a startup cost or like a capital expense, and there's no running costs. And this to me is, I was surprised because I assumed there were things like ice or fuel costs that like really mattered, and they do matter in a different way, but there's no decision where you tell yourself, no, 18 Titans is the right number for us. There's like that scenario doesn't exist, because it's always better just to store your ore in a Titan, because there's no inventory cost, there's no maintenance cost, there's no repair costs on a thing. In the real world, you don't have 200 carriers. I think the US has a standing standing navy of 4 or 5, or like a finite
11.
amount. 11. And 11 is a number. Like, it's not 28. It's 11 for a reason, because they just can't sustain more than that. Like, it has 5,000 crew. It has all kinds of like fuel expenses. It has a nuclear reactor. Like, these things aren't cheap, and that's why 11 is a number. We don't have any cap, any natural cap to that for an alliance to say, yep, that's our number. We're gonna have 8. We're just
Basically,
gonna have
infinite
200.
economies of scale.
Yes, we have infinite economies of scale, like Simon says. Sorry,
It's
good fella.
it's always better to have one more of a thing. There's no negative aspect to that.
No, and when you have resources that easy to get, and you have well, pilots and work hours are always a finite resource. Obviously, humans are a finite resource in this case, but it seems to be not enough. At least if you can get 200 Titan capable pilots, then you'll win the army with the 199. And I think I'd like to get to a place where you have to design your fleet, and it's somehow, you like, almost like an alliance fleet, like alliance tournament, when you have your 220 points, and you have to say, like, okay, I'm gonna have 2 battleships and 3 lodges or whatever. So a competition on grid is way more interesting than just like packing in infinite numbers.
Unless it's packing in a frigate into a battleship.
I think I love that idea, but yeah,
I
I was
do
actually
love it too. By the
I
way,
was thinking about like a proper like X-wing kind of scenario where you actually have like 100 people inside your carrier, and you did like a super bait. You think it's a lone carrier, and then out jump like properly flown. But that, like, that doesn't exist and isn't fun with Sinos. It would replace Sinos, that kind of gameplay.
I mean, Black Legion kind of did something a little bit like that to us, to the initiative at one point, which was an amazing kind of feat, to be fair. And what they did there was essentially use a walk call with a bunch of, I think were they procurers? I'm not sure which one of the most tanky of them, but they basically had a bunch of battle procurers and a battle rourke, with a bunch of characters with jump clones in that particular raw call, and they basically massacred a whole bunch of our raw calls by jumping in a single one of their own raw calls, and then jump cloning their characters to that raw call, and then jumping into those procurers that had heavy tanks and tackle. That I would love to see more often.
Sounds more like a
and in
CC
different
Rise
ways.
stuff, isn't it?
I mean, that's the kind of thing that you're talking about, right, Rotati? Like a bunch of subcaps in a capital that like.
I think you want to have a role at a certain point in the escalation. Subcaps don't matter, and that's like, I think that's something I'd like to get fixed. It's not going to be like with one patch or two, but I think that's the design direction.
Can I get you to go back, because you started mentioning things like negative feedback systems, and of course there's the ever discussion about diminishing returns and dynamic resource distribution and dynamic this and dynamic that. And have you considered looking at how you could do something like negative feedback system on basically just something like the content payout of moon fracking, right? So short frequency, very fast frequency fracks would give one type of yield, and very slow one would give a little bit of a different composition of yields. So you kind of balance it out depending on what you need and what is profitable at the moment. Similarly to how loot tables and loot fairy mechanics could be tied together to actually do something that is directed against the other. So rarity in one react inverse in the other, right? So you often get rare drops when you kill a player, but when you kill an NPC, the more you kill, the less of the rare stuff you actually get. I'm just thinking, how are you planning to put these things into the game in a practical sense, and what type of algorithms do you expect is going to be needed?
I think so we don't have a lot of these systems at the moment that we're designing them right now. Some of it is born from necessity because a lot of our, and this is why we tackled ore first, because it's our oldest system and it's touched very, very rarely in the last 13 years, 16 years. A lot of it is very legacy. And we also wanted to kind of understand the system and tweak it a little bit and figure out what we wanted to do over time. So that's why we tackled that first. It could have been like, obviously we could have just done something completely different, like remove all excavators from oracles and like patch it up for a while and see what happened. Like that could have been uh, a way to do it. But we wanted to go like bottoms up and understand uh, the ore flow, and a lot of it ties to the replenishment cycle, the downtime cycle, and that's also a problem we just want to solve as a company and as a product. And we are working now on all kinds of timers and attributes for belts and anomalies, where we could have things that have a limited life cycle or limited lifetime, or they deplete, or they start generating another resource as they get more eaten up. So like there's a different ore in the beginning than the end. Like those kinds of things are features that we are actively looking at. So to create these dynamic systems, and once we have a dynamic system, we can start talking about all kinds of things. One system that the content team has been working on is the weather system, or I guess I don't know what you call it. We call it the weather system. Like it's the wormhole abyssal thing that we're rolling out. So we have this capability to have all kinds of bonuses or negative penalties to anything in the system. We can just generate like classic, like poison damage is now at 50% in the system, or electric damage is 150% bonus. Like those kinds of I can't system-wide effects. System-wide effects. That's what they're called.
Yeah,
We
I
call
mean,
them
just
weather
like
system.
in low sec
Yeah.
now, the warp speed.
Yeah,
concept.
exactly. So that is a very interesting thing we can take into our designs. And when we have a weather system in one place and we have a dynamic asteroid belt that can take input from the universe, we can say when this asteroid belt wants to spawn, it checks whether there's a system-wide effect, and if the system-wide effect is in place, they could trigger different kinds of ores and minerals when it's spawned. So if there's a poison system-wide effect, it creates the poison ore, like in limited rarity. And then we have a depletion on that, so you can't just farm that forever. And then the system-wide effect turns off, and the universe is back to normal. So this is how we can create way more dynamic exploration, where there's hunters out there trying to find the system-wide effects that you want to, and hoping that you get a rare spawn of an asteroid anomaly in that system-wide effect. So it would make require everyone to be out there looking, like not knowing everything, because right now everything is known, and that is also something that creates complacency and boredom, is that you know where this enemy is going to spawn every time, every single time in the same place at the same time. That is not fun gameplay either. So dynamic distribution is the way to go, but there's a lot of I would say scales of dynamic distribution. So the end goal is dynamically distributing the necessary ore for the whole universe instead of giving them infinite amount and seeing what they actually use up every day during downtime or on between downtimes. But if we had a great system, we would actually kind of empty out a region and then move that into another region, so ore would flow and those kinds of things. But that's more aspirational. That's, I would say, a more 3 to 5 year old system.
But more in the low-hanging fruit area, which is kind of what I was hinting at with the systems that are not necessarily random or force majeure based, like weather, which is pretty much something you guys are going to make, and then you're going to make it more or less predictable. I'm more thinking the things where a player-driven activity impacts something in the ecosystem, so it can potentially spill over to everyone else's activity, or basically not necessarily following a system, but making the things like the loot drop or the respawn rates and things like that diminish enough so you are forcing yourself to move out. And you could even also have things like, again, back to the rarity, the whole thing of rarity items in MMOs is a little bit of a joke, because if something is mythical and supposedly only one or two in existence, but pretty much everyone has them because that's the cookie cutter build, it's like, how can you maybe build algorithms that will do that? So if I do something in one area of the game, it spills over to someone else in a completely different location, because then you don't have to build that much, right? You just have to build one algorithm, and then the rest is us doing shit.
Yeah, it sounds a bit like, I don't even know if this was ever presented, but the idea was, I think 5 years ago, to have this kind of never-ending war between the factions. They would have their separate lives as organizations. They would mine the ore that they would need, and if you'd leave them alone, they'd build up forces, start building fobs and stuff like that. And then they'd, like, if you left them alone, they'd be a formidable force, and they'd maybe actually start fighting other AI in the sense, and the players would be a part of this whole thing, and that would mean that every region would be different based on player input. We have like inklings of this. We have NPC miners. They're mining belts every day. And for example, a low-hanging fruit for this is, why would Gurissa's pirates just get spawned constantly at the same rates, at the same sites, at the same strength forever, and just be killed? Why wouldn't they escalate? Why wouldn't they call in reinforcements? Those kinds of things. And I think escalation paths within PvE is something that is a dynamic feedback loop, or negative feedback loop. As the more you mine, the more angry they get, until they actually spawn something horrible, and it kind of insta kills you. Or
But you're a fan of scarcity. Shouldn't you also give them the feature to do the opposite of actually de-escalating completely and
and
running
fleeing?
away?
Yeah, exactly. You scared them away. Now they're never coming back. I think these are all ideas that we're thinking about for sure. So I completely agree with you. It's just like, it's on the docket.
Because it ties into something that, again, you might not remember, and this is the archaeology you're talking about. Many of the things that we have had in the game, and I call them band-aid solutions to problems that should have been solved with something like dynamic stuff, is something like the whole gun mining, and how that pretty much outcompeted the mineral value back in the day. And then the whole thing of these features being used as compression tools before we had proper compression. It's just every single time we get these problems that arise, it feels to me like the way that CCP has solved them is by kind of scratching them over, fallowing them, or removing them from the game in a way that where the nerf is actually making the feature completely useless. A good example is we had the ability or the utility of meta items to put them into invention, which was a kind of nice feature to actually sync these drops out of the game. And then for some reason, that was also scratched. And the same with how mineral content of meta items was completely nerfed because people were using it to mine instead. It's just, why not make those faucets actually respond and go away, or at least reduce themselves so much that you can't sit there and suck it all the time? And this brings me into the whole faucet sync thing, right? Have you considered figuring out how to stabilize the balance of the ecosystem by having all these things being responsive so that basically it tries to keep things in, so you can turn the faucets and the sinks off, both sides, so it just stays in player versus player activity?
So what you're describing is obviously aspirational, and I think we just agree. I would like to start before I do that, or we try to do that, is I'd actually like to start balancing the risk and reward of the features that we have today before I start like trying to fix the past too much. I think there's just a lot of things that people can do in Eve, but they've optimized or min-maxed into not doing them. And there's just a lack of demand for certain items. There's a lot of interesting items in all kinds of dungeons and features, and or that is simply garbage. It's just useless. It has no use, and there's no reason to do it. And what we want to do is create demand for these items, and that would be the first step to me. The second step is simply to balance the things that are overused in the sense that they're just out of whack on the risk and reward ratio. So there's a lot of problems that have been solved permanently, and they're just things people do without risk every day, like burner missions, like high sec incursions. There's a lot of things that people just run, and they run them every day. And I hope that's not the alarm that's peeping on me right now. I'm in the office. So I think that is where we want to go first. Like, try to fix and balance the current system, and then aspirationally, we're working parallel towards a more dynamic distribution of things. If we can add some depletion mechanics on the way, I think that'd be great. I'd like to start with probably some of these kind of infinite sources like PV dungeons, nullsec dungeons, for example. I'd like them to escalate or disappear at some point, but that's not where we are right now. We're really looking at like all our feature sets and whether they are in the right balance of risk and reward.
Cool. So hey, we're a little
Awesome.
bit over. So I want to give everybody a chance for their one. We do the one last thing comment and everything like that. So and I'm at a little bit of a hard stop today, so we can't go too far over. Is that okay with everybody?
Oh, so it's going to definitely be a one last thing rather than a 15 last things.
Yes, it is. Would you like to start us off, McLeod?
Ah, no.
Okay.
Not at the moment. I'm considering my options right now.
Considering your options. Excellent.
Yes.
All right. So, Arendis, how about you?
Okay, I've actually got two last things. One is a suggestion. The other is kind of a question. The suggestion is if we're gonna be looking at scarcity and trying to encourage destruction, how about offensive use of salvagers and salvage drones? And as for the question, given that you're in charge of ecosystem and CCP has a fish tank, any chance that you know whether or not CCP Leggy Bro will be looking at a new AT?
Saime, Alliance Tournament.
Mostly
We
whether or not
know of the demand
whether or
for
not the worm is going to be working.
I think we should make, like, if we find him again, we'll definitely make sure we bring him.
I actually thought it was like first when I saw it, I was like, come on, guys, it's some creature in a fish tank, stop it. But then I started reading about puppet worms, and that is some like scary animal.
Horrific shit. I thought he was there on purpose. I didn't blink. I was like, oh, it's like these the cleaning fish. I thought he was supposed to be there, just eat just some refuse or garbage from the other fish, and then it was like, nope, he's just been there, silently watching.
Yeah.
Cool. Caleb?
Yeah, I agree with Chat that I think the worm should be in the game in one way, form or another. But as my last thing, I would just very short comment on what is the exact idea behind the way that you guys actually did the moon changes recently? Because I've been looking at them and there's things in there that I don't necessarily understand. Is there a bigger vision that I'm missing? Because this whole thing with making tritanium this completely horrible thing that you can't source, and then you can still source it with you can source pyrite and mexilon, which is the other low end ones, in some wormholes and with the small moons. What's the idea? Is there a grand vision that I completely missed? Because this was not how I envisioned that you guys would change it.
Yes, there's definitely a grand vision. And part of it is geographical scarcity or distribution. We want to have good control of individual ores and minerals, and the way that the ores were composited wasn't really like we didn't have the best tools to be able to carve out where we wanted to have certain minerals. So obviously we wanted to have something that's only in null sec and only in low sec and only in high sec, and some things were only in high sec moons and only in low sec moons and vice versa. So we wanted to have at least one unique channel for like a group of minerals, and that's where we're going. And on the R4s, it's in the footnote that we will be introducing a demand for R4s in the future, near future.
I think worth adding that there is a blog coming out Monday or Tuesday as well.
Yeah, we'll clear most of this stuff up in the next week.
Good fella, it's your turn.
Yep.
I will throw it to Rotati first, and then I will.
Yeah, I really just from an ecosystem perspective, we looked at the sentiment reports, the survey that a lot of people answer every quarter, a lot of players, and we take it to heart and we try to fix the things that people complain the most about. And the people that biggest complaint for the last 3 quarters by a mile is botting. It's not super cap balance or inequality. It ranks high, but botting has ranked high for a very long time, and that has been my major focus for the last 6 months, 6 to 9 months. Now I'm carefully moving over to more ecosystem things, but we have made a huge wave in this war, and I just want to point out that before the blackout, we had a lot of bots. We saw the effect of them. They just left when they lost the intel because they relied on the intel to be out there. When they left, we found them because that's basically like we found these big farms that had gone silent, and when we looked at their history, we could see like patterns that were obviously botting. So when I banned tens of thousands of dormant accounts. They had been poisoning our PCU. They'd been doing this for a very long time. They built up a big infrastructure. We've eliminated them, and the curve of botting is just keeps going down and down and down in the last 6 to 9 months. You can see it in the numbers, but you can't see it in the PCU because we've been having this wave of new players coming in for the last 6 months, and I'm just very happy with the result that we've achieved in the war on botting. I'm hoping that I see it in the survey, like some positive news. If it's still the most complained about problem, we'll just keep working on it. But right now, it's more less of an ecosystem threat than a PR or a feeling or a
Perception.
sentiment. Yes, perception. That's mine.
Yeah, can I jump in now or?
Yeah, you do.
Certainly can.
Yeah, so I think on this just discussion we've been having on the ecosystem stuff, impact of it, and like the putting things out there and changing the whole landscape. It's just with the botting, for example, that Ratati was just talking about, it shows that when we put a hyper focus on something like botting, there is great success that is being achieved. Like 80% of ISK via botting now reduced, and I really like this approach of just tackling botting, then moving on to the next thing, mastering things instead of trying to just boil the ocean with one move. It goes also into the capital change and stuff, just trying to iterate to get to a better state. Same goes for the NPE that Ratati touched upon. I'm sure you guys have watched some of the World Tour last year, where we talked about the focus of NPE stuff. the NP team has been doing tremendous amount of great work, and if you play the NP now, you will see the difference. And we're seeing it in the numbers. The session lengths are getting longer. There's more people coming in. There's more people staying. And we've also been able to get much more people into the game. Right now, there are about between 6,000 and 10,000 human beings trying out EVE for the first time every day. So, like, for a 17-year-old game, we are still goddamn sexy. It's just like fantastic. And it's this hyper focus that we're going for, focusing on certain projects where there are, like you've been talking about, Caleb, low-hanging fruits, improving it, and then moving on to the next project.
Cool. That's good stuff. Dirk looks like he's on mute, so he's probably not here yet, but he can come in. McLeod, are you ready?
Kind of, yeah. I was gonna kind of ask, a little bit about, because I know that you guys are doing the, sort of resource ecosystem right now. Eventually, when you guys get around to doing, other ecosystems in Eve, like specifically the like Intel ecosystem, the information sharing ecosystem kind of thing, like, could you guys take a look at how much information we all get from kill mails, and maybe like dial that back a bit would be fantastic, because I think the information overload that we get from perfect kill mails or perfect kill mail reports is a little bit much right now. But other than that, because I know you guys are like, that's far in the distance. Other than that, like, you guys do realize the amount of people that are going to be like wanting to get avatars after this new trailer comes out, right?
They're very sexy indeed.
Well, they're definitely looking at now.
On the ESI Perfect Intel, it's definitely something it's on our radar for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah, and to jump into there, like, the Black Hat is probably like one of the most debated, controversial subject in recent times of EVE Online. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that.
Oh, for sure.
But by going for this concept of Black Hat had been debated for like a decade in the EVE community or something, and now there is data on what happens when you go from a binary move from 1 to 0. So you have two poles now, and okay, it was not very surgical, but now we have the information, the feedback, the learnings to go for a more surgical approach on this perfect data versus no data thing.
They're considering we should probably be a little bit more analog in the middle of it, sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we've seen now two extreme sides. We've seen feedback from players. We have seen learnings, etc., etc. And now there's much better understanding instead of trying to debate it still for the next 10 years whether blackout is a good thing or not. Like, now it has been done, it has been changed, and now we can continue to evolve the game.
I look forward to your future work, fellas.
All right, I don't really have one last thing. I think it's great. I really appreciate that you gentlemen came and spent some time with us and had the opportunity to share probably some of the most important things that I think are going on at CCP and within the game. So I think it's fantastic. So thank you very much.
Just a very short thing. If you need help with the archaeology, Ratati, just poke me, because I kind of remember most of the stuff.
Don't do it. We're warning you. Don't do it.
Yeah, work with the community.
Yeah, but you guys are always welcome. If you ever have something you want to share with the community or anything, and we haven't invited you on, please don't think that we have to invite you. You are always welcome to say, "Hey, can we come over and have a chat?" And so,
if you just want to pop that,
you're always welcome. So.
Yeah, if you just want to pop up on the on one of the shows and just have a chat, then that's cool. Like, even if it's not even related to EVE Online, like, yeah. I mean, half of our shows are typically not related to EVE Online. We kind of do in half and half. We tend to do like a half and half sort of show. This has been, pretty much 90% EVE Online related. So,
Yeah.
because you guys are here,
I did forget our most important pre-show topic though. So I do have one last thing. So everybody is kind of in their homes and they're not at work and whatever, they're sheltering, whatever they're doing, right? So spending a lot of time with my kids and my second oldest, who's 17. I learned this week that when he cooks bacon, he does so with butter. So he cooks his bacon in butter. And there are moments when you're super proud of your children. This is kind of one of them. Bacon, butter. I mean, how can you go wrong?
Never not butter.
Yeah, that's what Caleb said. Never not butter. And we were trying to work. We were supposed to work that into everything in the show, but we didn't do it. So, yeah, butter and bacon. It's quite amazing. I'm like, why does his bacon always taste so good, right? And yeah, he cooks it in butter. So hey, that's all we got.
Butter is like bacon. If you add it, everything just gets better.
I think this is the only thing Simon took a real note of during this call.
I'm writing down notes,
It's like I gotta get this
hates
down.
vegetables, hates fish. Like it's just like right up his alley.
So yeah, so that's a true story there. So all right, I want to thank to everybody that we may have missed that followed or renewed their subscription in chat. So thank you very much to those who I missed. I'm very sorry. And that's pretty much it. We are out of here. Everybody say goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.